We've just gone live and recording, so participants are starting to come in. Right, so we'll get started pretty early, and we'll obviously people will start to drip feed in over the next kind of 5 minutes, but we'll get started. Good afternoon, and welcome to our second Testing ROQs event with the lovely team at ROQ. So we're honoured today to have the lovely Stephen Johnson joining us again. So Stephen's the director and founder of ROQ. Not ROQ IT. We've got James.
You've said it again.
I said it's a joke. We've got James Mike Royal and James Payton. So they're all testing consultants at ROQ. Here with us today to discuss some of the common testing challenges they're facing in COVID-19 with their clients. I'm sure a lot of you guys are joining us today as well are going to have face similar challenges within your own organisations and clients. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen shortly. So he's going to do the honour of leading the questions. So, but we want to keep this session as interactive as possible. So if you could, jump in if you've got any questions, pop them into the Q&A box. We're going to run questions at the end of each section. So anything related to the topic, just pop that in the Q&A box, and I'll be going through those as we go along. We're also going to be finishing with an open kind of ask anything type Q&A. So if there's any questions that you want to ask the panel, any other challenges that you're facing that we've not discussed, please add those to the chat box, and we can run through those at the end. So without further ado, over to you, Stephen.
Brilliant. Cheers, Rose. Thanks for that. Yeah, I guess when we're speaking to Rose about what we can do to for sort of live Q&A was to really look at kind of what's changed, really what we've seen that's different. We work remotely generally anyway because of our test lab, so we're kind of used to that. But things have definitely changed, and we thought what are some good things are coming from projects and some examples that the guys have had. So we wanted to take 3 different client examples really today. And just to walk through them, open some questions. They're quite big, meaty subjects like UAT, data migration, etc. So hopefully the challenge that you guys might be facing, and hopefully get some hints and tips. So the guys is really going to tell you stories. So James Easton, you're going first, as we know. This is all good. So James is on my left, and so it's quite a good order. This. Do you want to just talk to everybody about what your role is, what the client does, etc.?
Yes, so I'm currently working for a Magic Law Circle firm. They have over 5,000 employees across 26 plus countries across the globe. ROQ are delivering a managed test service. So that's delivering all business and technology change through project and BAU, covering all the various test types from functional, non-functional, automation, etc. In terms of my role, so I'm the managing test consultant. So first and foremost, I make sure that the managed test service is delivered against the client's needs. I'm responsible for the day-to-day team management. That's demand, forecast and resource management and planning, allocating resources to meet the project and BAU demand, applying governance to what we are delivering and also how we are operated as a service. That's my basic role. And where time permits, I do every once in a while take on test manager roles on large complex projects.
Fantastic, brilliant. So what's the client seen, those sort of major business challenges you've had sort of over the last couple of months, really?
So it's rollout and distribution of security patches for business critical applications to a global workforce. And that's really to ensure that the business remains compliant and supported.
Excellent. No, that's really interesting. So let's pick about some of the challenges around the rollout and distribution.
Yeah.
How is it normally being done?
So normally its application patches are bundled together and they are deployed in one deployment via a local network once a month. And this minimises the end user impact so that they're not having to take weekly, daily releases of application software updates.
Cool. So I guess what's changed?
So I suppose the challenge, the challenge is obviously the entire workforce is now working from home. So being able to distribute the same volume of patches to ensure that compliance is met without disrupting the workforce. With end users having to work from home now, they're now constrained to the local bandwidth. Therefore, it compromises the ability to kind of bundle and patch large application updates all at once.
And this is globally, I guess.
It is global, yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of testing, have you approached it differently? What's kind of changed from a testing perspective?
So really, the challenge has all been about how we manage and maintain what gets deployed, to ensure that they deploy what is required to make everything compliant without disrupting the workforce. We take a more rigorous risk-based approach now to the testing of applications and the rollout and distribution of applications. So that's looking at security over new functionality. And there's been an enhanced and an increased focus on the end user because they're working remotely. We're trying to make the rollout and distribution a little bit more interactive and a bit more user-friendly. These people don't have, may not necessarily be technical, particularly in the business side of things. So taking deployments, naturally it's easy for them when it's all bundled up in one and it's just one release and they know exactly what they're doing. But because they're having to distribute packages and applications based upon security, they're having to take them individually. They don't have that assistance of somebody who sits next to them who may be more technically advanced and be able to guide them through it. So it's really about focusing on that user experience and thinking about the individual and how will they cope in managing to take this, because obviously it's critical to them that they take that application.
Yeah, no, there's time. We know time's money in that kind of business. You mentioned earlier about it being a global workforce. You sort of reiterated it there. Kind of what's had that as you sort of manage the service across the world? How is it that you've adapted and kind of what things you're doing differently?
Yeah, so with the method that we used to take the bundling up, we knew exactly when things were coming. So we had 2-week window to actually test the applications in isolation. Then it went to a week of a bundle package, and then a 4th week of a final kind of snapshot of what was being bundled out. Now they're having to take daily risk-based impact assessments against what products need upgrading and when and how. So I have to be less structured because I can't just forecast and schedule people in. So I've become more reactive as opposed to scheduled and allocated. And that's in terms of managing the demand and making sure that people are available to test that before and if we have to distribute it out. And the second one is enhanced comms. Touching on what you've already said, we do work remotely. So the use of internal WebEx, Jabber, Teams, instant messaging, emails, it's imperative that we make the most of those. In my role, I'm spending a lot of the time on the phone to the team to make sure they've got the support, what they need to do, when they need to do it, and how they need to do it. Unfortunately, I don't have that luxury of just getting up from my desk and walking over to somebody else's desk just to make sure they've got what they need. It's a case of organising a phone call or organising an interactive session via one of the channels.
Yeah, we're seeing that across the whole world, seeing that, the whole country seeing that, isn't it, in terms of interacting with your teams, but from a testing point of view. The one thing you mentioned earlier, and I guess it's probably quite a challenge for people who are dialing in as well, who will probably listen to this, is around sort of compliance, because obviously I can't imagine people relax compliance in situations like this. They might send some dates or when legislation comes in, but compliance is compliance. And we talked earlier about GDPR issues with even Zoom. That's what happened with EasyJet the other week. I mean, shit happens and you got to deal with that. It's not going to be because of COVID. Have you seen any changes around that compliance side of things in terms of what you're doing now?
Well, we have to ensure that the same value of business critical applications can be tested to ensure that we remain compliant. So 18 months, 2 years ago, we introduced an automated regression pack for the BAU process. And basically, this is executed against every single BAU application release, and it hits all business critical applications. So having that significantly reduces the manual effort by up to approximately 75%. So having that makes life easy for us. So when the applications are coming through, we can quickly turn them round. Whether that's one application, two applications, or three applications. Then got to consider obviously your device types, because not everybody's on the same device. So what may work on one device may not necessarily work on the other device. So, you know, we've got remote access to various test devices that we can access and execute our BAU automation pack against, to ensure that everything is being touched, so that when we are providing test summaries at the end and our recommendation to proceed, the business can be sure, and technology can be sure, that we've tested against all the business critical permutations.
Yeah, no, that's important, isn't it? And then kind of final question for me before we ask any or get any questions from the audience. So you've had to deal with all these external changes, and they came about pretty quickly, for sure. I'm not going to ask you all this one. I'm just going to ask you this. Has it had any impact on the client's ability to deliver? Because obviously we play a part in that, don't we? In terms of the service provider, and probably few people dialing in are all part of some business yet. But has it impacted the client? Because obviously ultimately that's what it's about, isn't it?
When we entered, working from home, there were risks and concerns raised by the business, and particularly as a law firm, they have a lot of client interaction. So there was a nervousness there of how can I continue to manage my clients' expectations whilst working from home. And the honest answer is everything's gone smoothly. There's been an emphasis on the communication side of things. So, the client themselves they've done the risk assessment, and they've aligned people accordingly so that they can react to things if they go wrong. And as a testing team, we've not had to change anything really. We've been there with the client over 3.5 years. We've got a really good core set of best practice in place, which involves remote working. We've got physical kit and virtual kit. So again, going back to the point I made earlier about being able to test all those different variations. We've got robust resource management, so all the demands being met, nothing's been turned away. And we've got utilization of great test tools. So one of our main test tools is Azure DevOps, cloud-based. Everybody's got access to it. So our reporting, our ability to share information, obviously internally, is all there for us to see. And effective comms channels. We have morning Covid-19 test calls are called. So that's basically a touch-based call with the entire team in the first thing in the morning, just to make sure everybody knows what they're working on for that day. I have, daily meetings with the client, so I can make sure that I know what's going on in the background, and making sure that we as a service are aligned and our way are most effective. Again, my phone's never really down. The team know where I am, the client knows where I am, and at the same time I know where they are. So, and as an organisation, they've increased their meetings, but by that, initially they were long and they were trying to cover everything off. But as they've established this risk-based approach, they've now become to the point. So when you're going on a half-an-hour call, it's only going to last half an hour, and you're only going to focus on what it is that needs to be discussed on the call. And then everybody can go away and start delivering in line with that.
Everybody can be actually doing work rather than in meetings. That sounds
absolutely,
fun.
Absolutely.
It's more knackering for sure. Brilliant. No, thanks for that, James. Have we any questions come through, Ross? Oh, you're on mute.
A good start. We've not had any questions come through yet. You must have answered that to the point, James.
That's good.
But has anyone else got any questions? Is there anything that I've missed? No, I think we're all good. We can move on.
Good. Well, so I will save some up for after. We've got some crackers.
Thanks, Steve.
Excellent, right. Thanks for that anyway. So going to move on to Mike now, who's bottom left for me. And I guess if you're just similar to James, do you want to give a bit of a snapshot of the client and kind of what role you play?
Yeah, sure. So the client is a world-leading international consumer goods company, or to be more accurate, it's a fast-moving consumer goods company. Owns around 400 brands, I think at last count, operates in over 190 countries, and it employs around 90,000 permanent employees. You could probably double that for the likes of contingent workers, consultants, etc. In terms of ROQ and my role, so we've been working with the client now for over 10 years, probably one of our longest engagements. We've provided a whole range of testing services during that time across quite a number of big kind of global programs. My role is, similar to James, as the managing consultant. So I'm there to support the clients. I get engaged early to understand what the requirements are for a particular kind of program or project. Make sure that we understand those and that we mobilize the appropriate resources at the appropriate time. I'm also fully engaged on as the ROQ principal on a large data migration and divestment program.
Excellent. Good timing for giving this presentation. Excellent. So we're quite a few weeks into lockdown. You sort of mentioned earlier, it's quite a lot of weeks into this lovely lockdown. So what are some of the challenges you've observed in the last sort of, I guess, 2 months or whatever it is now, 2 and a bit months? That's kind of you're taking into consideration in terms of what you're seeing.
Well, unlike possibly a lot of organisations, we as ROQ and as the clients, we're quite used to working from remote locations. So it's the client has pretty much a kind of globally agile workforce to a large extent. So it's nothing really new to us. It's almost kind of the default. But with the spread of COVID, there's obviously been a significant increase in the demand across kind of key cloud services. And that's where we're seeing some of these kind of issues manifest.
It's interesting that, because a lot of the, I've read lots of articles, and I'm sure everybody's on the audience about, cloud's the holy grail, isn't it now? So go to cloud, you'll be fine. But I mean, there's always challenges in any IT movement. Perhaps I've been around long enough to see that. So what have you noticed around the cloud side of things that's kind of pain points, good points?
So we latterly observed quite a significant reduction in throughput on the data migration program that I mentioned a short while back. So this particular program is moving large data sets between cloud tenants, and they're doing that in tranches. They're doing that over quite an extended period. It's probably about 8 months in total. And the throughput speeds that we observed initially during testing in the production environment were used as a bit of a benchmark for kind of the future tranches. So since the recent kind of lockdown and remote working measures have been introduced globally, so we've seen that the throughput speeds that we previously achieved pre-COVID just took a nosedive.
And is that something that the client did, or?
No, it's not something that's kind of within the control of the client. So these are cloud services. It's a kind of public cloud service. And what's happened is obviously as the increase in demand has come along, they've introduced an increased level of throttling, and they've done that to kind of stabilize the platform and maintain a reasonable level of service for obviously my clients, but everyone else is using that kind of shared kind of platform and infrastructure.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Very interesting that. So kind of what does it mean in terms of the long and short term impacts of that? What you've seen, what you've heard, what you've observed?
So so the client and the program are kind of reasonably fortunate in that we'd already completed the testing by the time that kind of COVID came along, as well as quite a significant portion of the production data migration. So we'd gone through a number of tranches. And so we were fortunate that we could actually absorb that kind of decrease within the plan that we had. But it does raise the question, within the testing space, if you're part of a project that's kind of planning or in the early stages of moving, a significant volume of data, so whether that be from on-premise to cloud or from cloud to cloud within the same infrastructure or between different cloud providers, you might want to consider the likes of first and foremost, this would be my top one, speaking to the cloud provider. If you've got that kind of relationship and you've got a single point of contact, understanding what potential constraints you're working with, and in doing so, you'll be able to make more informed decisions based on that. It's kind of pointless just kind of guessing. You might as well just have a chat with them, just understand what exactly the state of play is. Based on any potential decrease in throughput, you potentially could still accommodate your kind of data migration testing within those timelines. It might be that you had a reasonable amount of kind of fat in the plan. If the plan, for whatever reason, is no longer achievable, then you're kind of looking at understanding maybe peaks or troughs and where they might be helpful. So there might be dips in demand on the platform. And if that's the case, you might be able to see if you can schedule your testing so you can take advantage of that. It might not be the case. It might be a general, one fits all cap, but it's worth having those conversations.
Yeah, I guess it's anything like this, and sort of a separate conversation with James in terms of how other suppliers have kind of coped with this, and the general consensus from our experience has been quite good, hasn't it? I think a lot of supplier organisations have handled this quite well, so it's interesting about that. It comes down to relationships, and they don't give us a heads up about what's going on, please. And again, given the size of the client, and we know like Microsoft or them kind of companies are probably like, this is one of their flagship clients, isn't it, as well? So, you thought they'd have more natural sway, but it just shows that even the biggest are getting impacted by this.
Yeah, definitely.
So, anything else that you think the guys might be worth considering around this?
I think maybe looking to approach migration testing slightly differently than you'd originally set out. Don't get just stuck. This is the plan, we need to adhere to it, come what may. So if the plan was to perform maybe multiple migration iterations using, like production, like, the Holy Grail, you want to do it at volume, maybe move away from that if that's going to take too long. Look at chunking that up. So reduce the volume of data during the migration, but ensure that you still got that kind of comprehensive set of data types to making sure that you're flushing out kind of data integrity, mapping issues and such. If the delays are absolutely unavoidable, so look to explore other opportunities to use that time effectively. So that could be increasing the coverage and focus on any kind of transformation element, or if it is wish to perform maybe data cleansing in the target system. So, like everything, it's all kind of gung-ho when you get ready on the project, so aggressive timelines. It could be that you could shift that left and take extra time to clean up the source system, get rid of any duff data, make sure it's as clean as possible, and then hopefully when things kind of subside a bit and things go back to some level of normality, you can progress with your data migration.
Excellent, that's really good. And actually, we've got some questions coming through, but I'll save them to if we've got one more question. I've got some questions coming through on the Q&A and on the chat, which is really good actually around this. So we talked about sort of data migrations, and we'll come back to that. Is there anything else you talked about working remotely with a client as kind of BAU for them and stuff? But have you seen out any other tips or hints that you think other people might benefit from that you've seen that might be of use? Yeah,
I mean, as I said, they do have a big push on agile working. I mean, but that doesn't cover every aspect of the business. So we have latterly observed some issues relating to the likes of call quality, which I'm sure people on the call can understand. Dealing with people now working from locations that maybe internet connectivity is not particularly great. So it can sometimes be a challenge, at the best of times. On a daily basis, I'm dealing with people located in, other countries with varying fluencies in English. I've got a reasonably broad northern accent, throw into mix a degraded line, and things can quite quickly go south. So some of these users that I've been speaking to latterly, told me that they don't normally work from home specifically because of that kind of poor home bandwidth. I'm talking about maybe regions like Africa, South Africa, India, where just that infrastructure in certain regions might just not be up to scratch. We've been quite fortunate because the impact on the program has been relatively minor. As I said, we got quite a lot of the bulk of the work out of the way before kind of this kind of national disaster hit, or international disaster rather. And we're not at a stage where we'd undertake any kind of big initiatives with end users, such as like maybe user acceptance testing. But if you were, I could easily foresee that this could cause some challenges. And if I was needing to engage volume of users at this time, and this obviously was known to be an issue, I'd be looking maybe at some relatively straightforward kind of no-brainers really. So maybe avoiding video, not a great thing to say on this channel, but so just using voice only just to maintain the bandwidth. Offering advice to users in advance of sessions. So if they do have particularly poor connections, make sure they're just kind of minimizing any disruption on the line, that they don't got kids streaming in the background, and kids not screaming as well, ideally. If the volumes permit, if you're not talking about hundreds of users that you're trying to get on calls, or maybe dozens of users more logically, can you refer to like simple conference calls? And also quite an easy one, and if you've got kind of a structured approach and it is a big initiative, can you create documentation? Can you create videos in advance of the calls, share that offline, and just supplement that with a kind of a straightforward call?
Excellent, really, really good, Mike. That's some good perspective on that. And again, with the questions that have come through, I think there'll be some good ones. Do you want to pick them questions up, Rob?
Yeah, perfect. So we've had a really good question from Femi here. So he said, have you experienced any sort of scope creeps due to COVID-19? And if yes, how have you dealt with that?
No, not necessarily due to COVID. There's been slight delays in the program for other reasons, and there's been some scope creep from a third party asking for more things to be included. But as a program, we were quite rigorous when we were defining the scope initially. So anything that comes out of the wash afterwards is dealt with via CRs. So we have quite a control process. So if it's something that we can accommodate and it's reasonable, yes, it gets agreed. But there's an understanding that it's going to be delivered maybe slightly further down the line.
Cool, perfect. And Chris also asked, so since COVID, have you do you experience some with Microsoft some data or servers latency? I hope I phrased that right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get involved, so I'm less hands-on in my role. So the day-to-day tasks are done by more technical resources than myself. In terms of latency, I've been speaking with some colleagues that are kind of SMEs in some of the areas that are kind of supporting the program, and they have noticed when they're trying to connect to machines, when they're trying to access the likes of Azure Active Directory services, they can see kind of prolonged periods where things are just hanging. And I think it's just they have Premier support in place with the providers, multiple providers, but it is a case of just kind of suck it and see at that time. If it's going way beyond, we've had things where we know that certain processes, when we're implementing changes to kind of move data around between tenants, it should take, for example, 5 hours for a process to run, for that data to get propagated out, and it's taking a number of days. The guys have got the contacts. They just speak to, in this case, Microsoft, just say, is this unusual at this period? And they just say, actually, there's a problem at the minute. It's just getting absolutely hammered. It's just a case of you just have to deal with it. And then obviously take that into account for the next task. So if it's in terms of planning, you just need to make aware your internal teams, make aware any third parties that this is a bit of an issue. It's outside of our control. we just need to have a bit of a plan in place to kind of mitigate that if it kind of crops up again.
Perfect. Cool. So Gary's also asked, do you think work from home infrastructure will drive people to have secondary broadband connections to the home, which are solely for work?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. I mean, I've been reasonably fortunate because we've got fibre up to the point and kind of traditional cable in. So we're not too bad in terms of my throughput. I can't speak for anyone. If they're struggling and they want kind of dedicated bandwidth, then yes, I could see. I'm not such a vast consumer in that sense. So the kids are probably downstairs now watching Storybots. And obviously call quality is reasonable. So I'd say for me, no, but yeah, potentially for others.
Okay, perfect, cool. So Louise has also asked, have you found that the pressure for the number of releases has increased, reduced, or remained the same?
Yeah, I can't answer that accurately on this particular program because it's not that type of delivery. So ours was one work stream of the project, which was a big one, was moving essentially users off one O365 tenant to another, and that's done in tranches. So it's not application releases as such, it's more just a kind of en masse movement of data. So we, as mentioned before, we had a plan, we got through the vast majority of that as per the plan before this kind of kicked in. We did notice a degradation in performance, but we were able to absorb that. So the actual tranche nature of the data migration remained as per the original plan.
Okay, perfect. And then there was another one from Chris, which I think was really interesting. So he said, what about security testing? So now that we are all on remote, you know, is there any risks on the migrations of sensitive data?
Yeah, I mean, we're working remotely as kind of end users, but all this data that is getting migrated is sitting on-premise data centers or in the cloud. So existing security requirements, I think, are in play. I don't think anything's massively changed in that sense. So if you're moving from, I don't know, to on-premise to Amazon Web Services, or you're moving to Azure platform, you would be looking at a particular program to make sure that things are obviously secure by design, which they should be in those environments. And just making sure that those requirements that you flagged that are specific to a company as part of the project are met. Security testing is quite a niche area, and one thing, I mean, I'm by no means a security expert, but one of the things I ensure that I do is when I'm on a project and it's got that kind of infrastructure or technical element, is making sure the right resources are brought in to do the analysis. But when you're reviewing requirements, is making sure that one, that you understand where the non-functional requirements are, but also, and I think this is probably more applicable, where there are no non-functional requirements relating to security, that's probably even more of a concern. So that whole kind of due diligence, just keep on top of it.
Okay, perfect. And some of the questions we'll come back to at the end, if that's all right, guys.
Yeah,
sure. Don't want to miss James out. There's just one more from KR, which I think is really related to the kind of data migration piece. So KR would like to find out what are the tools available for migration testing, data migration testing.
It's basically horses for courses. It depends what you're doing. So if you are doing kind of data migration, but it's more to a data warehouse or a data lake, there are very specific tools for that. It could be that you're migrating to a SaaS service, in which case you might use the SaaS vendors tools. It could be that you're using a particular product, so SQL, and it's a database related emphasis. You might want to use kind of Oracle's kind of bespoke products, or Microsoft's or IBM's. It depends. There's a whole host out there. I can, if you want, after this, I can paste the link in to like top 20. But it really does depend on what the objective of the project is.
Lovely, thank you very much. Like I said, there is some others which we can kind of come back to at the end, if that's all right. And if we could move on.
Yeah, no, everybody's got wound up now. Yeah. It's all right, Easton. It's all right. I've got some questions for you to cover off. Don't worry.
You can pick up some of mine.
There, haven't you?
I'm stored. I can see him. Brilliant. Now we're going to move over to the other James, JP, as we call him. So if you hear me call him JP, that's why. Do you want to talk through what kind of client? I know you're working on the same client as James, but we obviously want to talk about something very different. What's your role in that project?
So yeah, so as you said, Stephen, I'm working for the same client as James Easton, leading global law firm, over 5,000 employees. I'm currently working as a test lead for that client. So I oversee their project delivery alongside other test leads.
Fantastic. So we've talked with James before around sort of the releases and the sort of Windows 10 aspects of testing, which is thrown up. But what else have you seen on, obviously working on the same client, but obviously it's a global client with lots going on. We know there's lots going on in terms of projects wise. What else has really jumped out for you in terms of what's happening?
Yeah, so managing UAT within projects that have a distributed workforce now. Mike alluded to it earlier. UAT can be difficult in this sort of climate. Budgets are being squeezed on projects. The money needs to be elsewhere to deal with COVID-19 within the client. I'm ensuring that knowledge is distributed throughout the test team and throughout the business as well regarding testing and product knowledge.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting actually. We'll pick up on that because a few people have talked about UAT and some of the questions. So, you talk about distributed UAT in particular. How have you handled that? How's it normally done?
Yeah, so usually for UAT, users are based in offices around the globe, so we can get everybody together in a room and run through the task of UAT fairly easily. Everybody's in one room, we can lay out the plan and step through that. And of course, when users are in offices, they're connected in the same way. They're either landing or they're using the office network. We can restrict that, whereas we can't anymore. And the users will also have people from the project team in the office. So asking them questions is very easy. UAT users can just get up and speak to myself or whoever and ask for issues to be demoed to them. And obviously, it's a bit more difficult to do that now.
Yeah, no, I get that. So kind of what kind of some of the challenges and I guess some of the constraints really that you faced in terms of the current setup?
Yeah, so sort of flipping those on their head. So almost all the users are working from home now. It can be quite difficult to contact them if they're on calls all day. We're no longer able to just walk over to their desk and provide support to them anymore. We have to find time in people's diaries in advance, just to have a catch up with them to see how they're getting on with UAT. Some users are using their own home PCs to remote into the client network. The client has remote servers that lawyers can remote onto from home PCs. So that brings an issue with access and not knowing what sort of device they're testing on. And of course, it's been alluded to in Mike and James's sections, but different locations equals different broadband capabilities. People aren't as productive as they would have been in the office where the broadband is possibly better. So we're having to deal with that as well, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah, and it's a really good one to explore this because I know we touched on a couple of the elements, and I guess some of that distributed elements kind of covered elsewhere in terms of logistical thing. But I guess with UAT, in terms of that, if we assume that businesses slowed down for a lot of organisations, but equally for others, it's not. It's still going at the same pace, and there's competitive advantage to be had at these times, I guess. So that kind of sign off, that business approval is still quite key, isn't it? So in terms of, have you done anything different to rather than just not do it? What have you done differently, I guess?
Yeah, so some projects have to go ahead regardless. The business need it and require it. The budget was approved beforehand, and there's deadlines to hit. So in terms of doing things differently, not too much has changed from a test perspective. As we mentioned before, ROQ are remotely based. We've got our own test lab and we work remotely 99% of the time. But to give you an example of how we've adapted to the current situation for a project I'm currently working on, we have UAT testers in 32 offices around the globe, and we've managed to just get them onto calls, similar to what Mike suggested actually. No video, just get them all on a call and sort of have a classroom based, if you like. Everybody's in the same call. and we just mute ourselves. And if somebody's got an issue, they'll mute themselves and speak to us, and we can walk through the issue with them. We also use a local document management system. So all UAT users can access the tool that's required, or any documentation around it, no matter where they're based, no matter how they're connected. As long as they've got internet, they can access that. And our test tool of choice is Azure DevOps, as James mentioned earlier. We can give all users access to that, and they can review the defects, look at test scripts, anything they need. They can see it in real time, and ask us questions in real time as well. It's about that collaboration. We've also changed how UAT users can sort of interact with testing and engage with us. So now there's multiple things now. So we have Teams channels set up for UAT where people can just bang in screenshots or do whatever they need to do, and we can respond when necessary.
Excellent. Yeah, I know even on other clients where we've done videos for users, particularly on global deployments where you've got that. It's like herding cats sometimes, isn't it? For any UAT listeners, I apologise, but it is about herding cats sometimes. And even more when the cats are at home and working different hours. So definitely challenging. So, so some about ideas there, some really good stuff there. Have you any other ideas and suggestions that people maybe can consider?
Yeah, so make sure communication with UAT users is good. It's key. Make sure that everybody stays in the loop and stays engaged is really key, especially when people are working from home. UAT users have day jobs to do as well. The majority of the time, they're business users, especially in a law firm. Time is money. So making sure they feel valued and keeping their spirits up is definitely one key suggestion. Ensure everybody knows their responsibility during the UAT phase, from the testers to your defect manager, if you have a separate defect manager, to your project manager, down to the UAT users. It'll keep everybody focused. Everybody knows what their role is and what the end goal is. And maybe one of the more important points is is making sure that they do feel valued. I think 100%. Keep them engaged. You get a good product, and people can really engage with the product.
No, it's good that it really is. And I guess when you're sort of answering these questions and some of the questions that are coming through, is that a lot of this is just good practice anyway, isn't it? I mean, the distributed nature of it adds a dynamic, but actually keep good communication. It's just good solid practice, and maybe UAT fails a lot of the time because a lot of the base principles just aren't done, are they, in terms of engagement? And I always think, even when I look back to ROQ and the remote testing in the test lab, everybody worries about the communication, but then you over communicate to sort of handle it, don't you? You force communication where you say, well, and again, we'll all be suffering this. Well, I don't meet people by the water cooler now. No, but you'll guarantee to check in at 9:05 every morning because you'll have a team huddle when you never used to have that. And you kind of change your behaviours, don't you, to make sure things happen and sometimes disaster or stuff can impact that. So that's really good. Yeah. I guess before we come into, so there are some good questions coming through. Before we sort of move on, and just to wrap it up with a slightly different finish to the other two guys, is there anything you've kind of done prior to this in terms of the COVID situation that's kind of now you might have not done it, or people might not do it, but you really benefited from now? You're thinking, thank God we did that type thing.
Yeah, so as James alluded to earlier, when we first engaged with this client, we set up a list of best practices that we follow. So we've got that embedded within the client. Everybody understands it. So that's one key thing that we had before this, which has enabled us to keep performing well into COVID-19. And also knowledge transfer. We have knowledge transfer areas growing all the time. So again, if something were to happen to myself, who's overseeing one project, somebody else could step in and take over that role very swiftly, not impacting UAT too much. Which is key. You really want to keep UAT rolling. You're so close to the finish, you don't want anything to let it down there. And within that KT, we include how to use the tools that we use in Azure DevOps, or what the project-specific tool is that we want to roll out. So whether that's a new time recording piece of software, etc. So yeah, two key things were the testing best practices and the KT as well.
Fantastic. No, really good that. Yeah, no, that KT is one of the things, isn't it? It's like, yeah, we'll get around to it. Oh yeah, it's really important, but yeah, it's not important. And then It happens and go, all right, how didn't we know this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When someone goes on maternity leave or paternity leave and you go, yeah, it's not available now. And more important things to deal with.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, James.
No worries.
Rose, I think we've got quite a few questions coming.
We have, yeah, we've got a lot of questions come through, so thank you very much, guys. Right, so the first one from Chris. So with a large number of UAT business people and the number of licenses from a test tool limited due to the cost, in addition, in addition to this is end-to-end tests. How do you coordinate and track the executions statuses?
So in terms of licenses, we use Azure DevOps and we give the UAT user stakeholder access, which I believe are unlimited. We as ROQ don't own the test tool, the client does. So that they manage that side of things. So I'm not too sure of their setup with that. Sorry, Rose, remind me the second part of the question, sorry.
So the second part of the question was end-to-end tests. So how do you coordinate and track the execution statuses? Yeah,
so we would usually document the key processes throughout the piece of software, and then we would raise those as UAT tiles in Azure DevOps. And because we're giving the users access to Azure DevOps, we will pre-record the steps on how to use Azure, how to go from proposed into an open state, and then once they've tested it, they'll either pass or fail it. So that gives us the benefit of reporting. We can quickly do queries to see how many of the tests have passed, how many have failed, how many have defects linked. And it's all about just educating the users. You'll find once, if you make the process seem easy and easy to get along with, the users will buy into it. And then you can keep the key stakeholders happy because we can now report at the click of a finger with UAT. As I said, we have ongoing UAT at the moment with 32 jurisdictions around the globe, 50 plus lawyers going at it, and we can report it at a click of a finger now, and they just move their tests along when it's necessary.
Okay, perfect. So Louise has also asked a really interesting question, which I think probably quite a lot of businesses will be facing at the minute. So have any of you been impacted by some staff being furloughed, so either in your test team or UAT? If so, how has that impacted you, and how have you managed that impact?
Yeah, so in terms of furlough for the UAT testers, not really, but we have had people book emergency holidays for childcare and things like that. And that's where the knowledge transfer really comes in handy, and the pre-recorded videos. So what we'd usually do is we'd ask for a delegate. So if anything were to happen to the person that was doing UAT, we have a second in command, if you like, and they can be onboarded quite quickly with the knowledge transfer documents and the videos as well. And that's within the test team. And if a UAT were to go off sick, or as I say, people have had to take emergency leave for childcare. So that process, it doesn't really impact UAT as long as your plan is done well.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So there's a few more questions that have come through, which are probably more kind of broad. So Femi's asked or suggested that COVID-19 has just exposed weaknesses in business continuity plans in most organisations. So how do you guys think we can use this as an advantage to testing to better evangelise testing to organisations? Good question, right?
Yeah,
good question.
I think from I mean the guys can chip in, but I think from how I see it is that it's just I mean shit happens all the time, doesn't it? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you know, this is bad from a health perspective, but in terms of disruption to business models and to that stuff, that's no different than any other time of life, really. So I think where testing's always got its challenges, where it's usually bought into, and it's been its biggest challenge for forever, basically. I think that's changed quite rapidly. I think what my interest now, I think where testing will become different, is the fact that a lot of people have moved stuff very quickly, and they'll cut a lot of corners for that, without question, and probably rightly so. I mean, it's probably taken some risks, and it's all balanced out to be able to enable the workforce to carry on. So I think immediately there's going to be a lot of retrofit. I think there's going to be like, actually, we shouldn't have done it this way, but we know why we did it. how do we re-engineer some of that? And that'll be, well, let's re-engineer it, but let's make sure it's actually proven worthy, hitting the compliance, hitting the security, hitting the, so I think them kind of things will be an initial aspect. I think, as the guys have alluded to on some automation, sadly, a lot of people are reducing headcount, but you still need to get through a certain amount of tests to mitigate. If it's not automated, you're gonna you just elongate your projects. So automation is going to be as key as ever. And I think there'll be new things, and we're working on a couple of products ourselves, which are around. You've got this distributed workforce now with their own devices, and you've got their own networks at home, and all this kind of stuff. And that's not going to change quickly if it changes ever, really. So how do you look at what challenges they are create for testing? Because at the end of the day, you can't test everything in-house within you need to think about it differently, or it's part of your acceptance or part of your system integration testing is going to be different. And if them kind of things will throw up. So I think it's exciting for testing, but I think it's about the sponsorship still. I think you still got to get it sponsored at the right level. But I think your messages might be a bit more pertinent now, because, nobody wants to have the, system hacked or go down with the distributed workforce, because there's no comfort blanket anymore. There's no, we'll just go and see Jane or Tony in support, or do you know what I mean? It's not like that anymore. So I think they're going to have to get more rigor around it. I think that'll come from above, personally.
There's a couple of things that have been asked as well. So on that note, Peter's asked, do you see a change in the way we work? So I know Mike said this is the default for them. We've seen an increase in productivity since working from home at BT. So do you think collaboration can still be success if things stayed the same? I know you briefly touched on that a little bit there, but do you see that kind of?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that initially. I think there's probably been a reluctance because some people might just not trust the workforce or some of the workforce, and I think that's generally been confirmed to be not the case. We've had a number of stories, certainly within our organisation, of this working really, really well. I think there obviously will be exceptions whereby after this they'll probably want to revert back to maybe office-based working. If you think like of some of the kind of public sector, Home Office, DWP, etc., where there are big security concerns around this. But I think generally what this has highlighted is that the barriers to working from home are not insurmountable. It actually gives more than it takes. I think, as we've all said about that, the collaboration element that can be put in place, the likes of Zoom. Not to go off on a tangent, but I was speaking to my father-in-law the other day. He works in the public sector, and he was saying that he used to travel into Manchester frequently to have face-to-face calls with senior public officials. And subsequently, they're on Zoom call and just said, why didn't we do this before? This technology's been around for years and years. Why have we all wasted an hour and a half commuting one way, an hour and a half the back, and we've just lost that time? It's people are driving; they can't use that time effectively. So I see this. I see this becoming potentially the new general norm. Yeah. If I'm totally honest.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can say from my client's perspective, they're just about to embark on a 5-year plan to change premise. And the plan's always been to be more of a hot desk approach. Certainly with working from home now, I definitely know there are discussions where they are going to revisit how many hot desks they actually need. Therefore, it could, because it's been such a success, the financial gains through revising their plan and maybe reducing these hot desk floors and space. Thanks to work with, actually found ourselves, so something good has come of this remote working, because the company and the organisation has continued to work as it did when we were all in the offices. It's allowing them to replan for the future.
And that brings us quite nicely into a question from Lee. So obviously things have changed quite dramatically with remote working, but if the remote situation continues in the future, can you see that there'll be opportunities to recruit talent based in other countries? So for example, Lee is a British lead QA, lives in Spain and working in Gibraltar, and will be interested in working for a UK-based company. So do you see this as being different to personnel being remote? but within the same country. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, like periodic meetings face to face, for example, which obviously we're not doing at the moment, but when we kind of get back into the offices, is there going to be a need for periodic face to face, or do you think we can start to rely on, kind of talent from overseas?
I think it's an interesting point. I don't think it'll increase it just because it can, because I don't think that's the immediate challenge. It's not the first place. Do I need someone? I'll start looking abroad and let's go to a bigger pond to try and get somebody, unless it's very specialist skill.
Yeah.
I think there's probably less reasons not to than there was before, because people can make it work. But from our experience of working a lot remotely, is there still this level of comfort where a client knows that they can still get you, they can still have you down to see them in London in 2 hours or Edinburgh in 3 hours or whatever it'll be. There's that feeling of comfort that you are. I don't know whether we're at that point now where that's gone. After it's only 2 months at the end of it, it's only 9-10 weeks. If this went on for another 2 years, then maybe that would become even less. But there's that point, and again, I know you can travel, but if you have to quarantine for 2 weeks either side of it, and that might change, you know what I mean? So I think I don't think there's any reason why it can't work anyway. And I think some organisations are probably more fluid with that, just culturally. So I think there'll be opportunities there, but I think there's less reasons not to do it, but I don't think it's going to open up a massive wave of bringing in loads of people from other countries just to work remotely, because one of the better things, we don't need to. There's not that need yet.
Unless it was something very niche.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so kind of just going back to what you mentioned, Mike, and obviously I know you guys, work with public sector and things like that. So Chris has asked a really good question there. With obviously the current situation, do you think that businesses are looking to have their testing teams, security cleared, if they're working with kind of public sector clients or other clients, obviously with that kind of, data that they're accessing, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's reasonably clear cut depending on the clients and the engagement. I'm not sure if the remote working is going to be a massive influence in that element. I mean, as long as, going back to a previous question about the kind of security aspect with data migration, as long as the devices that you're working from are secured, you're connecting in via VPNs, which, you would be. So if you're as secure from a home location as you are from the office, I'm not sure why there would be an additional need. There's obviously cost, time, resources in terms of effort to get people through security clearance. So I see it probably staying, certainly for the foreseeable, unless this goes on to be like the general new norm or we're isolating for years to come. I see it probably just maintained as it is.
Yeah, cool. And then there's another one as well.
On that, Ros, it might be an interesting point though, because if you think about clean desk policies and things, particularly around data and sensitive information, if you're in an office environment and you've got that handy, if you're at home, then actually your practices at home can't be governed the same, can they? So there's an element of trust that you're going to have in your employees in terms of who's looking over your screen now, in terms of are the kids in or are the kids' friends in or are there some, you know what I mean? Just when things get back to normal, there's more fluidity of people. And people working from home, it's like anything, it's just an increased risk, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's an element of things like health and safety at home, it's how do organisations, this is part of the do we come back or not decision, isn't it? Is what does it mean if we say our staff can work from home? Because a lot of organisations allow it anyway, don't they? Or just work from home on Mondays or whatever it'll be. But now it's becoming more formalised, I guess. They'll have to think about them things a little bit more, because ultimately it's GDPR, isn't it? If the kids decide to take a piece of paper from daddy's desk and then decide to show that to a friend, it's got sensitive details on it. Do you know what I mean? You'd never get a politician leaving anything sensitive on the tube, would you? But but it's them kind of things, isn't it? And it's just an added risk. And I guess in the world of testing, it's all about managing risk. So or mitigating against it. So
that's perfect. To be honest, I think we've pretty much covered off all the questions there. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and especially to you guys. And thanks for your insights. It's really interesting to hear. I think speak for everyone saying it's interesting to hear how you guys have adapted. You know, and obviously I know from our previous conversation, Steve, in our last podcast, you're still getting really excellent client feedback and employee engagement. So I think that, you know, it's clearly working really well for you, the kind of adaptations that you've made. So thank you very much. We are going to be having another event, so the third and final event in the Testing ROQs series, maybe with more to come in the future. So that's going to be on the 9th of June. So keep an eye out on the Transition Partners LinkedIn and also ROQs LinkedIn for details of the next session. We'll tell you a lot more very soon, but thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, have a lovely evening.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thank you,
Cheers,
everybody.
all.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye now.
Thank you.